Last night, during my usual nightly routine of watching YouTube on my TV, I stumbled across a video from the YouTuber Rich Footy titled Top 10 Best Footballers of All Time. Now, this was a very interesting video because the way, like the kind of criteria he had was basically I had to have watched them a decent amount, like I had to have actually seen them with my own eyes. It was his sort of own list that didn't conform into just the so-called, who's supposed to be on a top 10, because like Pele wasn't on there and he didn't watch that, right? So it got me thinking. I was like, I kind of want to make a video under that same criteria, but for something that I'm more passionate about. So, as a Washington Capitals fan my entire life, I am going to do my personal top 10 Washington Capitals. Now, I also am wanting to do this for my other favorite team, the St. Louis Blues. And of course, I'll probably end up doing one about the Ravens. But the easiest one to make last night after I watched that video was the Washington Capitals. So here's how we're going to do this. Similarly to the video I just described, it is going to have to be a team and a player that I watched live. There's not going to be any Mike Gardner in here, any Adam Oates, anything like that, right? Because I'm 19. So this video is going to be dated, like it's my age is going to show in this video for any, Caps fans who are 30, 40 years old, 50 years old even, and older. You're going to have guys in your top 10 that I'm not going to mention. And that's simply just because I wasn't old enough to watch them. And I feel like that's fair. I don't really have a connection to Mike Gardner. I don't really have a connection to Adam Oates. I don't really have a connection to, you know, any of those players from, Bondra, anybody like that. I don't really have a connection to them the way I do my top 10. Now, another little stipulation here, goalies are involved in this. Goalies are going to be in this list. When I name the player, over here on the left-hand side, there's going to be a pop-up of the player with a little photo collage that I'm going to be looking at here on my laptop to kind of almost like a PowerPoint. That's what the Rich Footy said in his video as well. He had a PowerPoint setup, so I'm going to steal that idea. We're going to have a little setup here, and there's 5 separate photos that sort of dictate why he is in my top 10. So I say, without further ado, let's go ahead and get it started with number 10, who is going to be none other than Lars Eller. Bit of a weird one at number 10, but for those of you who know, it is very obvious. It's pretty much solely for the reason that he scored the Stanley Cup winning goal. That is something that you can't replace. That's something you can't teach. It's nothing to do with a personality. There's nothing like that. It's just as simple as, winning us a Stanley Cup. He's always going to have a spot on my top 10, It's weird because Lars Eller definitely would have a higher spot on this list because winning a Stanley Cup is no easy task, obviously, and scoring that goal to do it, it should have more weight than, some of these other players. However, Lars Eller, late in his career, really started to dwindle and started to hold back a lot of the young players on our team. He was on a line with Ryan Leonard and held him back. He was kind of a liability these past few years before we got rid of him. So for that, he has fallen substantially and I thought about not even including him in the top 10. However, I thought about it long and hard, and I realized there's no way I can't have the Stanley Cup winning goal in my top 10. There's just absolutely no way. That's kind of the only reason he's on here. But I mean, he's on that Cup team. And just a little spoiler alert, one player on this entire list was not on the Cup team. So that'll give you a little idea of the kind of route I'm going here for my top 10. But Lars Eller, certainly a great player, certainly a fun little number 10. Definitely was higher at a different point in his career. But, unfortunately, he is not going to be any higher these days because of his late season or late career with the Caps shenanigans that really hurt his stock in my own head. Number 9, we have, in similar vein, Devonte Smith-Pelly. Another weird one, but I really do think that DSP was the X factor of the Stanley Cup team. When you have a guy like DSP, fourth liner, sometimes healthy scratch, randomly show up, score a goal in that game 5 where we won the Stanley Cup, which you can see at the bottom left on the collage. When you have a guy like that randomly show up, full of grit, energy, just a really this like super into it guy. He was I feel like when I'd watch him, he'd be everywhere on the fourth line, really getting in deep, and he'd get a couple shots. I mean, you can see the goal. He's falling as he's scoring this. Like it was a crazy goal. He just put in so much effort for the team, and just being such a presence in with seemingly the locker room, but absolutely on the ice from a fourth liner. Similarly to Lars Eller, I think he was a very, 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 very large piece in winning the Stanley Cup. And I think the goal he scored was so demoralizing to Vegas because for a lot of the game 5 that we won the Stanley Cup, and they kind of shut down the top lines. They kind of they performed well, and they made us have to play our third and fourth lines, and then you make the team play their worst players, and then they go and score anyway with Lars Eller and Devontae Smith-Pelly. It's just so demoralizing, and I think that was so big. His production, his playoff run in 2018 was just so substantial in our winning of the Stanley Cup. So for that reason, Devontae Smith-Pelly. Also, to be 100% honest, I love black players in the NHL. I love the representation in a white-dominated sport. I think it's really cool. And, I'm sure he's had to overcome a lot of adversity to get here. And, it makes me just honestly like it's one of those things where it's like it just makes me so happy to see him succeed and see him be the guy to really push our team over the edge. I love him for that. I wish he kind of stayed around longer, but I understand why we let him go. I mean, at the end of the day, he was a fourth liner. They come and go all the time. But overall, did so much for. I'm pretty sure all these photos are from that playoff run, and that's kind of all I'll remember him for. But that's more than enough. I mean, you won us our first Stanley Cup, buddy. That's fantastic, So amazing player, amazing memories, and overall just a great fourth liner. Next, we have the only non-Stanley Cup team player. This is a guy from the early 2010s. Back in the era when I get Caps Kids Club stuff, when I used to live I used to live in the DMV, and I used to get Caps Kids Club stuff because my grandparents, they'd have me on the subscription. And number 8 is going to be Mike Green. Now, Mike Green was just your typical defenseman. He was very good on the puck. He was pretty physical. He had this mohawk thing. You can see on a lot of these photos are just kind of him without a helmet on and this fucking bobblehead. So, with Caps Kids Club and season ticket holders, you get these little handouts. And for some reason, one of my biggest memories of these handouts is a Mike Green bobblehead pictured here. I just remember him being, he was always there when I was younger. He was a significant part of that team. Back in the early days of me being, conscious and a Caps fan. There's old video clips of me talking about him. I'll throw one up now. What's Greeny?
2 and a 5.
52, yeah, 2 and a 5. He was just somebody that I gravitated to as a kid, and he just has a kind of special place in my heart. He was just really solid defenseman. Honestly, this is the player I'm the most fuzzy about in my memory. It was the longest ago. But it's a name that always lives in my head, and he probably will always be, at the very least, in the top 15 favorite Capitals of all time, but certainly as of now in the top 10. He had a great tenure with the Caps. It's unfortunate he couldn't stick around for the Stanley Cup team, but, awesome player, awesome defenseman, and a lot of great memories as a kid going to watch him in the early 2010s. Number 7, we have Mr. Evgeny Kuznetsov, the most controversial player probably in recent Caps history, obviously with his problem with a certain white dust. But I love him. I mean, he got us past, he was a homegrown talent that's going to, a lot of these players are homegrown talents. I tend to obviously gravitate more towards our homegrown guys instead of the traded for guys, which is, I think, pretty standard for every NHL fan when it comes to their team. As you can see, his draft photo at the top, he's been with us he was with us for a long time. Obviously, a huge, integral part of our Cup team. Got us past Pittsburgh. He got us past our demons, so to speak. He got us through to that conference final that was so elusive for so many years. Scoring that goal, doing the bird celebration that he's iconic for. He was such a good skater. His backhand, you can see in the bottom left photo, his backhand was ridiculous. His skills, I think he's one of the most skilled players to ever lace up for the Washington Capitals. And I think, to me, he's one of the bigger what ifs in Caps history, career-wise. I think we didn't get to see all of Evgeny Kuznetsov. Well, I know we didn't get to see all of Evgeny Kuznetsov, with his problems with cocaine and everything like that. He just kind of, he went to player assistance program. Now he plays in Russia, I'm pretty sure. But he was so key to us, again, winning the Stanley Cup. He was so skillful. He would always be able to set up other players perfectly. Just one of those guys who filled his role perfectly. Not a high ego. Wasn't problematic on the ice. Didn't make any stupid mistakes in the playoffs. Always showed up, it seemed, and just overall had the clutch gene, had the skills to back it up. Also a Russian, which I do love my Russian players, which is a heavy foreshadow. I'm sure all of you know who number one is, but we'll get into it later. That Russian sort of, it just makes you, for whatever reason, I love a Russian, I love a Russian hockey player. Obviously, government-wise, very problematic, but in terms of play style and in terms of how Russians have benefited the Washington Capitals, another great Russian, very skillful, like I said. Overall, they're so deceptive on the puck, and just an overall amazing player who I will always remember as one of the goofy Russians on our team that really brought us that cup. So yeah, Evgeny Kuznetsov, obvious number 7 for me. I think he would be higher if he had more time with us, if he was able to do more with us. But unfortunately, with, like I said, his controversies, he wasn't able to do that. Number 6, speaking of controversies, we have none other than TJ Oshie. Now, this one hurts. TJ Oshie would easily be a top 5 guy if he hasn't come out. He's come out just as a bumbling buffoon, a MAGA idiot, and that's very, very sad to me. Current TJ Oshie, I'm not a fan, but in terms of simply what he's done for the organization, what he's done on the ice, I mean, he has to be on here at number 6. He was a gigantic part of our locker room, a huge locker room presence. I mean, he kept the morale high at all times. Huge part of that Stanley Cup. Of course, as the bottom left here is Sochi. I watched that getting on a plane in 2014. I'll never forget that moment. An absolutely sensational performance from him, taking almost all of the, obviously famously taking almost all of the shootout shots and winning it pretty much single-handedly for us against Russia in Russia. A beautiful moment. Did so much for the U.S. team. The beer where he, kind of put his jersey over his head and started drinking the beer through his jersey, I think just perfectly encapsulated what TJ Oshie was for this team. Crazy, chaotic, amazing personality, huge heartbeat of the team, high energy. He also kind of, when he was younger, I have this picture of him younger in the middle because he, in my mind, kind of encapsulated what a hockey player was supposed to look like, with the long hair, everything like that. Like, he just kind of looked like, whenever I thought of what a hockey player looks like, I'd think of TJ Oshie. So that was another thing. He kind of formed what I think a hockey player should look like. Of course, he also played for the St. Louis Blues. So I followed him his whole career basically. I was watching him for the Blues, then I started watching him from the Caps. Then he, helped with that Cup team as well. Um, just an amazing player. So much energy, so much dedication to the team. Again, very unfortunate with his political beliefs, but unfortunately, white, not a lot of education, rich, it's going to happen, unfortunately, especially with the American players. That's a big reason, I thought about involving Ryan Leonard on this list. Didn't make it, again, because he's MAGA. But Ryan Leonard also didn't win us a Stanley Cup and wasn't on the team for as long as TJ Oshie and wasn't a Blue before. So just all of that stuff adding up. TJ Oshie, easily on the list. Number 6. Can't be number 5 because of just his abysmal political beliefs. But what a player. I mean, what a player. He was just so perfect for what he was. He would really put his body on the line. He was always on the floor, blocking shots, making some ridiculous diving play. Awesome player, TJ Oshie. Now we're into the big top 5. And number 5 is going to be another American, another player who played on the American team in Sochi 2014. It's none other than John Carlson. Another obvious one here for pretty much any, especially modern Caps fan. Another guy, as you can see in the top right, another guy who came up through our system. So another homegrown talent that's always going to have more points for me. Again, another pretty solid player for the U.S. as well. So that I have that memories with him really showing up for us on an international level. Has over 700 games with us. As you can see in the bottom left, he's played so many games with the Washington Capitals organization. Obviously, his place on that power play, that Oshie was there also on times, Kuznetsov was there during times, but the consistent X factor of the power play centered around Alexander Ovechkin was John Carlson and Nicholas Backstrom, who we'll get into, both of them later, obviously. I'm just going to spoil it. They're obviously going to show up later in this list. But John Carlson, I think, doesn't get the respect that he deserves on that power play. I mean, he was just so on the puck, his vision was ridiculous. He'd always find the pass that either opened up Ovechkin or the pass to the guy who was not being guarded because they had somebody shadowing Ovechkin, or hell, sometimes he just ripped that shot himself. He was so versatile. He was so dangerous on that power play, and even how he would dictate himself 5-on-5, just so well organized on the puck. It just did everything that was asked of him. A solid what I think of when I think of an offensive defenseman is John Carlson. But he also was very sound defensively. Wasn't scared to get in the way of a shot block or two. Pretty physical for what he was, and overall just an amazing offensive defenseman. Again, I keep reiterating this with all of the people on this list, but it's partly why it's a significant reason why they're my favorite. A huge part of the cup winning team, obviously, assistant captain forever. And well deserved. And I think honestly, had he had stayed with us, I wanted him to retire a Cap so bad. I understand why he went elsewhere, and I understand why we're not re-signing him now. He's not worth the price he is now on our team. But man, unbelievable player. Another just perfect slot on the team, and another perfect entry on this list at number 5. Number 4. We have the only goalie on the whole list. And again, not at all a surprise, I'm sure, to most of you. It's Braden Holtby. Braden Holtby, where do I even begin? The save, I mean, in the Stanley Cup, you see in the bottom left against Alex Tuch, who is now a Washington Capital. But what a save. I mean, that probably gave us so much morale to win that game. Maybe even the whole series. You just weren't beating Braden Holtby in the playoffs. I think Braden Holtby's playoff production he got us further than we deserved in some years, and I think he dragged us to the Stanley Cup final. In 2018, when we played the Lightning in the Eastern Conference Finals, down 3-2, Braden Holtby literally shut them out for 2 games. Just to have a goalie who can randomly turn it on and be like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to let in any goals. It's so valuable. And he just was so excellent in his acrobatics. He would make huge saves all the time. Amazing clutch gene. Honestly, he's sort of, he was sort of like Jordan Bennington in the Blues Cup run, in the sense that he was pretty bad in the regular season, the year we won the cup, because, I mean, Philip Grubauer, I believe is who it was, started the first 2 games of that Stanley Cup run before Holtby had to come back in, clean it up, he lost the net, and he came back in during the most clutch time of the playoffs, and he played out of his mind. And he would do that constantly, and he was just an amazing goalie to build around, and he was so good in everything he did. Um, Obviously, his hair as well, the whole Holtby's thing was an amazing thing for the fans to get around, and I loved that about him. And I think also he was just such um another like solid personality. The Caps are famous for their personalities, and I think he was another really good one with his hair. He really played into it. His huge beard, everything like that, and just overall an amazing goalie. Super flexible, super athletic, and would just make save after save, keeping you in games. He wasn't like a Carey Price in the way that he would make it look easy, but he would make the saves when needed, and he would keep you in games you had no business winning. Which is really what happened with the save. He was keeping us in a game there that I really don't think we had any business winning, but that's who Braden Holtby is. He keeps you in games you don't deserve. He steals you games. He wins you games. And overall, just an amazing player, an amazing goalie, and another absolutely huge part of the Stanley Cup team. Now we're getting into the big three. Number 3, in my opinion, the future captain of the organization. One of the biggest pests in NHL history, one of the most hated players in NHL history, and one of the most loved Caps by pretty much everybody. It is, of course, Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson, what is there that to say that hasn't been said about Tom Wilson? His physicality unmatched, his fighting. He's the best fighter probably in Caps history, at least recent Caps history. Another homegrown guy. It's hard to speak about Tom Wilson because you know how Tom Wilson is. I think Tom Wilson is a top 20 power forward of all time. I think he's really redefined being a power forward, though, in the sense where you just, kind of hit and grit your way into goals, get in the way for goals. Tom Wilson has undoubted skill. I mean, he's one of the most skilled players on our team every year, year in and year out. And not only that, but he uses that skill and his physicality exactly as needed. Of course, he's had suspension problems before. But I would argue that although he's had suspension problems, I wouldn't necessarily consider him dirty in the same sense I consider Marchand or Gudas or Bennett, a lot of the Florida roster. Like, they're dirty. They will do things that are unlawful in the sense of knee on knee, in the sense of rushing goalies, in the sense of just overall doing things that are against the rules, that what you're doing is wrong. Tom Wilson, I think a lot of his suspension problems stem from not knowing his own size and not knowing his own strength and not paying attention to what part he's hitting when he's hitting a guy. For example, Oscar Sundqvist, that whole situation. Sonny's head was down. He hit him. I don't think he meant to hit him in the head. A lot of Tom Wilson's suspensions, I think, have been more accidental. I'm not going to argue that he's not reckless, and I'm not going to argue that he didn't deserve them. I just overall think he's not dirty in the sense of trying to actively hurt somebody to the point where they're out for an extended period of time. Obviously, he's trying to hurt somebody with a hit, but I don't think he's trying to take them out. I don't think he's some kind of headhunter. I think he's a physical player who sometimes gets a little too carried away and too reckless to the point where he deserves to be suspended. Now, With all that being said, Tom Wilson, heart and blood of the current Washington Capitals squad, in my opinion, because he's not too old. He's not exactly in his prime, but he, I think, has really taken over as a leader on this team. And I think without a shadow of a doubt, he's going to be our next captain. I think he's going to retire a Washington Capital. I don't see why we'd ever get rid of him. So much physicality, but also so much skill at the same time, like I mentioned before. And I think he's just such a force to be reckoned with on the ice. He strikes fear into the other team. He gets into other players' heads. He gets into the fans' heads. He plays the villain role, and he loves it. So, Tom Wilson, easy number 3 for me. Now we're into the top 2. This is so obvious. I already mentioned number 4. I think this is probably fairly standard for most Caps fans my age who followed it their whole lives. The 1 and 2 slots are very obvious. It's the reason we were as good as we were for as long as we were. These two players. I almost want to introduce them together, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to keep the format the same. At the number 2 slot, it's of course none other than Nicklas Backstrom. Nicklas Backstrom has assisted, I don't even know how many goals of Ovechkin's. In fact, you know what? Let me look it up real quick. Backstrom assisted Ovechkin on 31.4% of Alex Ovechkin's career goals. Effective duo. The most effective duo of all time were these two. And Nicklas Backstrom being such a huge part of that duo, a huge part of the power play. Always, unfortunately, living the shadow of Ovechkin, but he knows how to do it. He deserves to be, recognized as a significant part of how good Ovechkin was. I don't know if Ovechkin breaks the goal record without Backstrom. I really don't. I mean, he's proved he can play without him, obviously, a few seasons, but, I think Backstrom just did it better than anybody else ever could have. He was perfect for Ovechkin, so selfless, a pass-first guy. They'd be on the lines together. They'd be on the play, on the power play together. He had the most assists in the league a year because of Ovechkin, and I think this duo was unbelievable. Again, obviously a homegrown guy, drafted around the same time as Ovechkin. They came in together and they just started tearing shit up immediately. I mean, it was just so perfect for the lineup. It was so perfect for the team to have a pass first guy who's silent, not really, a huge personality, kind of okay with living in the shadows, kind of wanting to be the Ringo Starr while Ovechkin was the John Lennon, more than happy to be the backbone of the team, to assist John Lennon, to assist Alex Ovechkin, and just perfectly play that role. No ego, no incentive to try to pass Ovechkin in anything, no incentive to look him off, just always was just knew what to do at all times. It seems like he never made a mistake when he was on the puck. He would never do any of that Mitch Marner, flinging that shit backhanded without looking. None of that. He would make the pass. He'd make it right to your tape. He would just make your job easier. And just an overall beautiful player. Played the game perfectly, specifically for Ovechkin. And this duo is something that will never be topped in the NHL. I think the only duo that I think has more, the only duo I consider better than these two are the Sedin twins. And that's unfair. That's twins. They're actually have been playing hockey together since they were 3 years old. So I think this is the second best duo of all time. You can argue Yager and Lemieux, stuff like that, but I didn't watch that, so I can't speak on that. In terms of what I watched, it's easily Backstrom and Ovechkin. Just an unbelievable duo. So much so that there's even a commercial about that duo, which I'll play now.
Hey, Alex, why is Backstrom on your life insurance policy?
We're a duo.
A duo?
Yeah, if something happened to me, who is Becky going past the puck to? His power play points might drop. How he will get his assist? What then?
Yeah, what then?
And why is he always here for breakfast?
But I mean, just amazing players. And of course, I mean, I already gave it away. Number one is Alexander Ovechkin. If you haven't noticed already, I'll put both the Backstrom and Ovi up side by side. I put the Ovi and Backstrom holding the cup together, just split those in two for their cup photos to kind of symbolize their partnership. But Alexander Ovechkin, where do I even begin? I mean, if you look at the photos I chose, in the bottom right, that's a photo of me 15 years ago. So I was 3, maybe 4 years old, wearing a very, very small Caps jersey, which I still own. And if you look very closely at the bottom right, that is a masking tape 8, because I loved Ovechkin so much that I made my grandfather masking tape the number 8 on both my arms and my back so I could have a makeshift Alexander Ovechkin jersey.
Let's see your back. Turn around real quick. Let's see Pop's very talented skills. Wrinkled a little bit, but still looks pretty good. What number do you have, buddy?
Number 8.
Who's number 8?
Alex Ovechkin.
Yeah.
That is how deep this shit runs. I mean, I could go on. His personality, just so happy to be playing hockey, so happy to be on the Washington Capitals. He loves us. It was never a doubt that he was going to go anywhere at any time. You know, I never was ever scared that he was going to try to get money somewhere else. He loves it in DC. He's going to retire at Capital. He's done so much for this team, and he's done so much for my fandom. Him winning the cup was one of the greatest moments of my sports life. It was probably the greatest moment of my sports life. I could get into his skill, but I mean, you know how good he is. The greatest goal scorer of all time, chasing 1,000 fucking goals, which is ridiculous. This season, he's going to pass Gretzky in total goals counting postseason. I mean, just an unbelievable talent. A player who will be my favorite player for the rest of time. I could never imagine anybody ever overtaking Ovechkin. There's no way. I've been watching him my whole life. I grew up with his career. You know, he started his career in 2006. I started my life in 2006. And every step of my sports fandom has had Ovechkin in it. It's going to kill me. It's going to crush me when he retires. But I'm forever thankful. And I'm forever honored to have grown up watching Alexander Ovechkin, both live and on TV. Forever for my team. Most deserved cup of all time, in my opinion. He deserved it more than anybody in terms of how long he waited for it and how good he was. Always taking pay cuts, even to this day, still taking pay cuts. At one point, he was the most paid player in the NHL, but I don't even care because he deserves it. And he's still taking pay cuts to push one last time for another Stanley Cup. And this season, I swear to God, I hope he can do it. I hope he can do it because he just deserves it, man. Alex Ovechkin, forever my favorite Washington Capital. It'll never be close. No one will ever top him unless I meet them and they give me something or some crazy experience like that. But yeah, Alexander Ovechkin is my number one favorite Washington Capital. And that is going to sum up my top 10 Washington Capitals. If you did enjoy this video, go ahead and leave a like. If you want to leave your own top 10 of your favorite NHLers, favorite players on, your favorite NHL team, or maybe even your top 10 favorite Capitals, if you're a Capitals fan watching this, I would love to read them down in the comments section. I would love to talk about it with you guys. But anyways, that's going to sum it up for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.